Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Horst Lüning. I'm the master taster of Whisky.com. And here's my son Ben. And today we're tasting the Peated Malts of Distinction. And these 4 malts are the Ardmore Legacy, or traditional. It's called Legacy. The predecessor had been the traditional, I think. The Connemara, an Irish one. Bowmore, 12 years old. And Laphroaig, 10 years old. And those 4 whiskies are available in a small miniature set. And you can buy them at your...
Take your close-up.
Oh, shock. At your local good assorted dealer. And there are some whiskies, some assortments out there which do not have the Bowmore 12 years in, but the small batch, I think. But I think now they changed to the 12 years old in the assortment. So I think this is the new one we have here. And the Peated Malts of Distinction are all from Beam Suntory. And these Beam Centauri gave us the bottles. Thank you for that. And we will taste them in a sequence. And first I made a mistake in the sequence when we had the tasting just a few hours ago. And then we thought what would be the right sequence. And then we came to Ardmore, Connemara, Bowmore, and Laphroaig. And the original sequence in the assortment is the same. Mm-hmm. So now we did it by learning. Mm-hmm. And the Peated Malt of Distinction means all of those whiskies we have here today are peated ones. So they have a smoky flavor. And probably you would like to tell something about the peat.
Yeah, but before that, I want to say... Stream seems to be fine, and luckily today we found a very good date because it is 2 days before winter time, and maybe some of you watched the stream with where we changed to summertime and mixed that up, and we have been 1 hour late or 1 hour early, I can't remember.
Okay.
But this time we picked the dates so we don't have any trouble. Nice. And maybe you have seen live streams from Scotland. That was also very awesome. I found these very interesting. Learned much about how to get a good sound in a bad location. Mm-hmm. The clip-on mics are really good, and I'm really excited on the stream.
Streaming over the smartphone.
Yeah, streaming over the smartphone
in a remote location in Scotland.
I've done with the 3G plus. The H plus, the H is, I don't know what's called in English, and the 4G. So, but 4G is quite fine. It can often compare with Wi-Fi. Yeah, 4G is pretty fine. So, the Peated Malts of Distinction. So, Distinction, they are distinct ones, a bit different one, a bit better. They have the distinction of
not
peated
the normal
malts.
ones.
And the peat. When you have a peated whiskey, there is a bit of a difference between people. You can say a peated whiskey, or you can say a peaty smoky whiskey. Horst is the bit of a
the smoky peaty one.
Peaty smoky. No, you're a bit of a word Nazi on that one.
Yeah, probably because the following is: if you have a piece of peat, then this peat smells really nothing. So it's just probably a little bit of sour, because of these acids from the soil in it, but it's not smoky. And in the moment when you light up the peat, put fire on it, we will see that in pictures very soon, you will have smoke. So there's not a peaty whiskey, it's always a smoky whiskey, and the smoke results most often from peat.
Yeah.
So, and there are typically differences made between these phenolic medicinal whiskies, those very stinky ones on one hand, and on the other side you have these bonfire, cold fire, normal fire ones, and typically people say this is smoky, and the other ones, medicinal ones, the phenolic ones, they say they are peaty.
Yeah.
But this is
you should really say peaty smoky, because they are smoky, but they're peaty smoky. you can't really have peaty because you can't put peat in a whiskey just as you take peat and put it in a whiskey or peaty water or something. It's always smoky. The smoke is a taste, and it comes from the phenols. The phenols is a ring of C molecules, of carbon molecules, with not saturated bonds, but I think once desaturated bonds, and they have 3 desaturated bonds in a ring of 6 carbon molecules, and they have an OH, an oxygen hydrogen bond on them, and that is the basic phenol. And then we have a few types of phenols in there.
Just a few.
The major ones that give the taste are the phenol, the cresol, and the 2-ethyl ethyl phenol and guaiacol. I don't know what it is, but these phenols are the particles that give the whiskey the typical smokiness, and they're measured in parts per million, ppm.
Yeah, yes,
that's
and
what you know.
These phenols have a real huge mass of molecules. Not only these few basic forms, but there are 1,000 different phenols, depending what on this carbon ring are other molecules on. So these peaty phenols are have a huge variety and give a lot of differentiators in this whiskey. You're laughing? What's in there?
Someone said I just called you a Nazi. No, I said a word Nazi. I don't have the word. What's the name for a person who's really, really picky about words? You're really picky about the peaty and the smoky one. Okay.
So in Germany we have very often some funny use of Nazi, which is not always politically correct.
Yeah. The temperature in Belo Horizonte, Brazil is about 30 degrees Celsius now. It's impossible to drink peaty whiskey.
Well, probably this would be a time or a chance to try whiskey with ice, but only at 30 degrees centigrade. Yeah.
Maybe you need an AC. Okay, so let's go with the first one.
Yeah.
Ardmore Legacy.
The Ardmore Legacy is a distillery which produces a lot for the blended whiskey industry, and the major blend, which is where the Ardmore goes in, is the Teacher's Cream, Highland Cream. The distillery of Ardmore was built quite late in the 19th century, so 1898, and that was because the railway was just then finished and they were able to bring their goods in and ship their goods out by railroad. It's a 40% ABV. It's a lightly peated whiskey, as said on the label here, lightly peated. And we start with this. Yeah, already some peat on the nose, but there's also some fruitiness.
When will your glasses be available for purchase?
Yes, we started with the first sale to abroad, to overseas, and I think we will have some experience in the upcoming weeks and months. But in the moment, the shipment is really expensive, so we started with a lot of glasses for 2 brothers, and probably if you find yourself together in our forum and you can arrange an order of more than just a few glasses, then shipment might be cheaper. Otherwise you have please to wait until we find a distributor in overseas. Yeah. Some herbal note together with the smoke.
So everybody who has it at home, please write the taste into the chat and I will read your comments.
So the smoke is not that intense.
It's a bit sweet, heathery, some flowers, and just a whiff of smoke. It's very light for.
So if you put your nose quite a long time in the glass, then the smoke is stronger. but it's not that intense, so that you're able to smell the tastes or the tastes or the aromas behind the smoke immediately.
Yeah.
You do not have to wait.
Yeah, the thing is, there are some people have whiskeys I've tried on Islay, where the smoke is really damp, not that strong, but when you try it, it's incredibly intense. Sepp Blatter, a fresh note. Sebastian G, caramel. Jan Kupika, sorry if I butchered your name. A fresh, not phenolic.
Yes, that's right.
Sepp
Not
Blatter
phenolic. It's more a bonfire smoke.
Yeah, it's a bonfire smoke, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always get a mild spice from Ardmore.
Yeah. This herbal spiciness. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just 40%. So in the start, it's quite mellow. If you keep it longer on your tongue, then the taste is more intense. Some spiciness develops. It's prickling on my tongue. Smoke develops in my mouth. It's not too covering the inside of my mouth, no. But the smoke is in the taste, it's there. And in the aftertaste, very, very little oakiness appears.
Mm-hmm. Relatively sweet, relatively smooth, with just a whiff of smoke, with a bit of, I don't know how to describe it. It's a normal bonfire smoke, I would say. Mm-hmm.
So it's not too complicated. It's a smoky whiskey, a lightly smoky whiskey for the entry connoisseur.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever hadn't had any smoky whiskey before, this would be quite a good starter. It's a typical Highland malt. It's not too strong, too intense, and with a 40% ABV, it's not too demanding.
Mm-hmm. Sort of dry peat, says Sebastian G. Okay, good. Then let's talk about
what kind of Bowmore is there behind horse in the background. Well, these
Legend
are too
and
old.
Eight. But they're old bottlings, yeah.
They're old bottlings. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about a bit about the peat and how peat arises. What is peat?
Yeah, so you see here a picture from the Isle of Islay, where peat grows by 1 millimeter per year. So this is very, very little, which the soil rises by, decaying organic material, and so giving more and more soil. And if you look very carefully here, you see the grass on the top, and then a small layer of, say, 2 or 3 inches, which contains just normal soil, not peat. And you typically cut this grass with the roots below, cut away. And then there you see this light brownish peat, first peat layer. And this is quite a young peat, just a few hundred years ago. And this brings, different flavors in the whiskey. You have another picture selected for later use. And the deeper you come, the darker the peat is, and the heavier, the thicker it is. And then you cut this grass away. Then you cut the briquets, the bricks. With a special tool, and then you throw it up on the grass, and then you put it to drying, and the water just runs out of those bricks to the soil. And
you have to imagine where you cut it. Islay is very, very rainy, and it's very, very, I wouldn't say damp, but wet. Mm-hmm. So what you cut out there is very, very wet.
And it's heavy.
And it's heavy. Yeah.
Such a brick has 2, 3, 4 pounds. So it's quite heavy. More, even more, yes.
Yeah.
Depending on the thickness of the layer.
Depending on the size that you cut, can cut, I don't know.
And this was in the past really hard labor. And every Ileach, the natives from the Isle of Islay, has the right to cut peat for heating his home. And I was in a restaurant close to the distillery of Bowmore, and they had a peat fire there, and they had just 4 bricks in the chimney, and they lighted it and burned so hot. It was wonderful. So it's really a good fuel for your home.
Yeah. Source of energy. Yeah.
So and this one is the industrial harvesting of peat. There you can see the whole field was once covered by peat, and with his truck and some industrial equipment, they cut the peat and put it on those piles so that the water drains out, and afterwards it's transported to the big drum maltings where they need the peat for drying. And there's often said that this industrial harvesting of peat is not good for the environment, and that you ruin Scotland because you take away all this peat. But the surface of Scotland is that huge and that big, and this 1 millimeter rising or growing of peat thickness every year brings a multiple of new peat into Scotland, even digging out this one for the whiskey production. And the huge harvesting took place when all the people fired their homes with peat. Then the mosses and the peat layers vanished, and it was not that good for the environment. But today the harvesting of peat is quite little.
Yeah, because today other means of heating your home, like
natural gas,
oil, coal. Coal, they don't use coal anymore. And I don't know, what do you call it, the pumps, the heat pump. Yeah, they take the heat from outside and heat your home. They are getting cheaper and cheaper, so people don't have to go out anymore. Nobody really harvests peat for really heating their home. They just do it for the fun or for the history.
Yeah.
So this is a picture that I took of a peat brick from Laphroaig, and they told me there that they use a bit more of a peat that is more on top and that has more fiber content in it. So you can imagine these are the roots of grass, and they got compressed, and there is no air, there's just water. So this degradation, what is it? Is it degradation? Degradation and composting takes place. Not composting quite, but turning to peat takes place, and this is the very, very first stage of turning into peat.
And so this is from the upper layer.
From the upper layer, definitely.
And this brings different phenols,
different flavors. So when you have Bowmore has also different process that makes them unique, and we will show that later. But now let's dig into the next one.
We're going into the Connemara, and the Connemara is the Irish one. So Ireland wasn't very famous for its peated whiskey. No, it was, in the later decades there was no peated whiskey at all. In former times, of course, everything was peated in Ireland as well, because they had to use the peat for energy. There was no other energy, and Ireland and Scotland were very, very poor. So they had to take what they had, and they weren't able to import coal from from England. And there had been very few Scottish coal mines, I think. The Cooley distillery, which is located in the Republic of Ireland in the very north, close to the border, or the former border to Northern Ireland, they started production. They converted the distillery from a pharmaceutical alcohol production company into a spirit production company. First vodka from, I think, potatoes, and then later on they moved over to whiskey in 1989, I think. They started with that, and they were very innovative, and then they changed to produce peated whiskey or smoky whiskey as well. And as far as I know, the Connemara had been one of the very first, if not the first, of the peated whiskey from Ireland, which are available now. And, well, it shows no age statement. It's said from the Kilbeggan Distilling Company, 1757. But be careful. This was the date when the Kilbeggan Distillery was established. And this Connemara is most probably produced at the Cooley distillery. And they started production at the Kilbeggan Distillery in 2013 something. They built 2 pot stills there, and I'm not sure where they produce the peated one. I don't think that they produce at the Kilbeggan Distillery. No idea, really.
Yeah, but so they're pretty much the only Irish ones on the market right now to have a smoky one. But the Irish are not known for their smoky whiskey, and it's a single malt.
It's a single malt.
So we don't know if it's a pot still or a column still whiskey.
What I heard that it's a pot still whiskey. The Cooley Distillery has 2 pot stills, smaller ones, as well as 2 column stills, and those column stills are typically fed by the grain whiskey.
Typically,
part of the factory where there's huge fermenters there for the column stills. So this should be a pot still whiskey. Probably they write it down here on the. It's the only Irish peated single malt whiskey.
Only, okay, nice.
And inspired by the 18th century art of drying.
Yeah, the people say here that it smells a bit like bacon. And
it's double distilled in 2 small pot stills. So
people say it's a bit distilled like you have a bacon cask.
Bacon cask. Never heard about that.
Bacon barrels. There you go. Yeah, you can definitely say it has some. I wouldn't say bacon, I would say ham.
So it's definitely a lot more peat in it than in the Ardmore.
Yeah, definitely more peat.
So perhaps we should define these measurements of peat, which is typically set in ppm, parts per million. Those small, or those phenol molecules, you need just a very little of them to get these peaty flavor or smoky flavor in the whiskey. And there is a range from 0, which is typical Highland style or Irish style, to 50 ppm, which is heavily peated. And, well, there are a few exceptions with extremely peated ones. I feel that they are very, very stinky and not good for my personal meaning. So the intense ones have around 40 to 50 ppm. The lighter ones have 10 to 15. Ones in the medium are about 25 to 35. And the Ardmore, I would say, had about 15, maximum 20. The Connemara goes up to 30, I think, even 35 probably. It's definitely
but I expect a rather mild one with 40% and being all malt, and
there's some honey sweetness in it.
It's a bit more damp than the first one.
The first one was very light and clear. Yeah, and this one is. Equally strong in my mouth, and this one is hefty, intense, showing the distillery character and the fresh smokiness in my mouth, covering my mouth with the smokiness. So there's definitely more smoke in it than in the Ardmore.
I find it pleasantly and incredibly round. It's malty, it's a bit sweet, bit of honey in it. And when you swallow, decent amount of smoke. It's not a smoke bomb, but it's a decent amount of smoke, I would say. What about the water from the river near the distillery? Can it also bring up peat to the whiskey? That's a
fairy tale.
It can't bring the smokiness into the whiskey. Definitely not. It doesn't have effect on the smokiness of the whiskey
Because the ppms,
the phenols are
in it, 0.035.
Yeah, the phenols are
something.
Are only. Let's do it with the pictures. Okay, so how do we get to the phenols? We go there. So how do we get to the phenols? We have the peat, and we want to produce phenols because that's just compressed carbons, maybe a few hydrogen atoms in there still, and we want to produce phenols. That's why we need to burn it. And here on the right you see the kiln, and this is a picture from Bowmore, and they have a pile of peat, and usually the distilleries just take the peat bricks, throw them in and light them up. But at Bowmore, they actually chop it down a bit.
They grind it, yeah.
Grind it a bit, so they have more of a surface area, and that saves up a bit of the peat. This is the inside of the kiln. So you have a few metal bars at the bottom to get some air from the...
A lot of air.
A lot of air from the very bottom. And you have these bricks, so you have a chamber where you burn the peat. And usually you start off with a bit of a gas fire, and then it rapidly catches on, and then the bricks start to burn. And this here was the former distillery manager of Bowmore, I think, or master distiller. There's a video about him and me having an interview at our channel, and he lights up the peat to show us how the peat is burning. And if you look at the peat, you have a few roots at the top, but it's much more compressed, much more brown, and you see that it's a bit deeper in the layers here. So it's a normal peat from a bit more under the heather. And when you pack it up there, here you have a bit more fiber at the front and a bit more the deeper peat at the back, and it starts to rise, and the flames start to rise, and that's where the smoky flavor starts to form. Here inside the fire we have these phenols that we mentioned at the beginning, with the chemicals that form, and then they take their way up through the chimney, and how it gets into the whiskey we're gonna find out later. So
yeah, so come back to the water. In the water is very little phenol content. That you see some brownishness in that water, and typically the water is not drawn from surface water but from sources well below the ground, and then the water comes out quite clear, really clear. And the water might be a little bit sour, so a pH value around 4 or 5 is a little sour probably, and that helps the yeasts during the fermentation process, that they act faster, but that's all what the water makes.
Yeah, the thing is, a clear water, low iron and that kind of stuff is very important for the whiskey distillation. So water doesn't have a great effect on it. If you want to set up a whiskey distillery, look for the water first.
Yeah.
That's why we have like the Jim Beam distillery at Kentucky. They have the Kentucky limestone, and that gives them very clear and good water. They're very iron low water, and that makes a great whiskey then. That's why the Kentucky Straight Bourbon is such a brand.
There's a video about Scotch and Bourbon. I'm the Scotch man. You're the bourbon. Yeah.
And I want no.
So I'm happily handing over the bourbons to you for tasting.
Can you guys explain ppm quickly?
ppm means
Parts
parts
per
per million. If you have a percent, it's 1 per 100. That's a percent. And ppm is parts per million, is 1 out of a million.
So if you have 100 ppm, you have 0.1%. So you could say 0.1% phenols in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd have 1000 ppm, you would have 1% of phenols in it.
This probably you have with smoked ham.
I don't know.
But not in whiskey. It's quite difficult to get the phenols on the barley, but we have pictures of that later.
Okay.
Beats per minute.
Beats per minute.
Instead of beats per minute.
Beats per minute. Nice.
So here we go with the next one. The Bowmore, 12 years old.
And we had a discussion in the German chat about sherry casks inside the Bowmore 12 years old. And we're pretty sure that there is an amount of sherry in there.
Mm-hmm. And an amount of reused sherry casks because of the oak level in the whiskey. And it's the oldest one. It's 12 years old. It's like all others, 40% ABV. And
but it doesn't say on the bottle.
Mm-hmm. No.
They said in the chat they read the bottle and it doesn't say on the bottle. But it smells just... It just smells like there's sherry in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Bit of a...
That's more than a typical fruitiness from the distillery character. Definitely more.
So we had a very light one. We had a round Irish one with a bit flowery, freshney. And this one, I'd go with like...
So you have the smoke first, which is definitely intense. One says 35 ppm on a scale from 0 to 50. So it's quite not a medium one, it's a stronger one. Then you have definitely more cask maturation due to the 12 years old and probably this decent amount of sherry casks. And then you have the smell of the distillery character, some citrus notes in it. Yeah, and with the taste. It's very mild in the beginning, and then the oak kicks in. Those 12 years shows up. It gives you a well-rounded whiskey, starting with the peat smell, with the distillery smell, with the wonderful citrus notes in my mouth, and then in the aftertaste, some oakiness, some spiciness. So it's a very complex, complete whiskey which shows everything.
Mm-hmm. In the taste, much more smoke than the other ones. Definitely a phenolic, peaty smoke. With it's a bit sour. That's what tips me off so much about the sherry cask, that you have a bit of a citric, bit of a grapey tone in there. That's what I get about the Bowmore. Yeah, I like it.
So we just had a few.
There's a big discussion about how many percent is a ppm. If it's 10,000 or if it's 1,000. I would say it's 1,000.
It's 1 million divided by 100.
1 million divided.
It's 10,000.
It's 10,000. Is it really 10,000?
Yeah. Percent is 100, and a million is 6 zeros. So we had some. Sorry to interrupt you. We had some problems streaming, but it's
319 dropped frames is not a problem.
We had red. It shows red.
Red. Oh, okay.
Red flag and some hanging in the video.
YouTube didn't have it. There's a bit of a cache in there, so probably made it through. Do non-smokers like peated whiskey?
Yes.
I'm not a smoker. I
I'm
like
not a smoker
peated.
either.
It's like, it's for me. It's like ham. Like, do non-smokers like ham? Definitely. And the good smoked ham is definitely something good. Can't get the citrus, but I do get the sherry and the oak. Kind of artificial grape though, like children's grape juice.
To come back to the smokers, there is some risk that a non-smoker will say, well, I don't like it. There is a higher risk as a smoker has. If you offer a peated whiskey to a smoker, the chances that he say, well, this smoker, I don't like it, are not that high as a non-smoker. And therefore, this miniature set is so wonderful because you can, well, experiment and look if that peaty whiskey is, well, suitable for you or your friend or whatever. And then giving only little money away for knowing if you like peated whiskey or not.
Quit smoking and I still love it from Liquid Sound. So, did it help you? And then Mullemara Schlotzter, I stopped smoking, best substitute. So this one definitely got helped by the whiskey. If you don't do it too often, then it's probably healthy.
Don't use the word healthy with alcohol.
Yeah, definitely not.
And definitely if you're below 40, if you're older than 40, then alcohol has a slight effect on cleaning your veins, arteries and veins, because alcohol is used to solute fats, and this helps that your veins do not stuck, but not too much, otherwise it will harm you. Yeah. Okay.
My best friend hates smoking but loves peated whiskey. Ben, have you smoked cigar and had whiskey together? I've smoked cigars, but I didn't have whiskey with it.
I had one cigar, first and last.
First and last. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. We've just been with the burning peat. So what happens now? How do we get these phenols, this smoke into the whiskey? And it's about the malt. When you produce whiskey, you need malt. So you steep your grain in water, then the grain consumes the water and wants to grow. And what it does then is it takes the starch and transforms it into sugars. So this process takes a bit of time and needs air. And if it's wet, then you are
and the risk of having mold.
Having molds, fungi. So you spread it out on the floor about 6 inches deep, and you have to turn it very regularly. Some distilleries do it 6 hours turning, some do 8 hours turning, and you always open the windows to get in fresh air and just get this whole thing running.
Yeah, what's happening in the barley corn is that there is an energy stored in form of starch, and starch is nothing else than polysugars. And there are enzymes in the barley corn as well, which helps to cut this starch into sugar molecules, maltoses, and these are then in the plant converted into celluloses, because the polysugars, if you connect them left turn or right turn, I don't know exactly, then you have this powdery starch. If you connect them the other way around, then you have hard celluloses, which then will sometimes convert into oak, which you also find in whiskey. And you have to stop this conversion from starch into celluloses for the stem and the leaves of the new plant, just in the moment when you have maximum sugar.
Yeah. So the starch content drops, the sugar content rises, and at the peak, just as you said, you want to stop it. But how do you stop it? You take out.
No.
You take out.
They won't hear.
You take out the water, and you take out the water with heat. And what the people did in the early days is they dried it over fire, and they only had peat. So what they did is they had a big fire inside the kiln and spreaded out the barley on top in a special floor with a
Grid
on it and a few inches of the malt. And when you see it here, you have the hot smoke coming from the bottom, relatively dry, and goes through the malt and evaporates all the water. And then you have a mixture of very, very hot steam and very, very hot smoke inside this room. So turning this malt is not a job that you want to do. And I think today you have big suits and breathing equipment, but back in the days, the guys who did this got the most whiskey. Yeah. So.
You said about if you burn inside the kiln, then the exhaust gases are quite hot, and there's not much phenolic content in it. So
yes.
You're putting water on it?
You're hosing it down. If you want to have a really, really smoky whiskey, you can't go with peat fire. You have to have it smoldering, just barely burning. And what you do is you just take a hose and hose it down. And when you hose it down, you get a really, really thick, dense smoke that you can't look through. And if you
water,
very, very damp, and if you go in and touch the smoke, you can really feel that there is something inside the air. The air is very, very dense and heavy, and it almost feels like velvet. But this here is a bit thinner. So
it's quite difficult to take a picture in that. So
yeah,
you stood outside. As soon as you
walk inside,
it's completely covered with.
You'd
water.
have to heat your camera, but the camera doesn't like that either.
Yeah.
So, and how do you see a distillery? A distillery that is very old always has a kiln, and usually some distilleries take the kiln down because most of them don't use it anymore. And this is the pagoda on top, and there you see the smoke sometimes as an exhaust going out. And usually the buildings with the kiln are very, very square shaped, where you have this grid at the bottom.
Yeah, there are a few things to say about that. Those pagoda-shaped chimneys, they are very often black because the exhaust, the fine dust, and it's quite a problem. I think the distilleries aren't allowed to produce everything for their production, so most of the distilleries just have 10 or 15% produced due to historic reasons, and the fine dust is or might be a problem for the surroundings.
Yeah.
And if you drive on Islay, then you, from time to time, you smell the smoke from the very few distilleries which have pagodas left. And if you have new distilleries, they typically use these pagoda-shaped tops. Even if they do not have any kiln, then they use those pagodas on top just to show we are in distillery.
Yeah, if you have that sign, you know that's a whiskey distillery.
At our village we live, we have such a pagoda-shaped kiln on the funeral home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't drink too much, please. So next one.
Okay,
the last one.
Last one is the Laphroaig, and the Laphroaig is the strongest smoky one today. I think it has 45 ppm.
Just about that.
Yeah.
And it's written here on the label, the most richly flavored of all Scotch whiskies, which is important. Established 1815, and that is due to, well, there was a ban on producing malt whiskey in the Highlands. It was illegal to produce it, and it was legalized in 1823, 1824. But the Isles, the Isle of Islay and other isles, do not belong to Great Britain. No, they belong to the United Kingdom. So the rules for Great Britain, which is the biggest island in the United Kingdom, of the British Islands, do not apply to the Isles, and there had been former own kings, there were own kingdoms.
And I think the taxman was probably present on Islay because shipping is an easy way of transport. compared to going through the highlands and the peat and everything. But we forgot something. Mark Pfister said, "Is this where monkey shoulder injuries came
Yes,
from?"
very much.
The
The
from turning the
the
malts.
repeated
If you
work.
just go like this all day, you get a shoulder problem, and that's the
monkey shoulder.
shoulder. And
So they got crippled, really, with thick, huge.
yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah.
And today they invented
The turning
the Saladin box,
The Saladin box were
where like with twisters,
in it, electric motors.
motors.
I think it was a guy called Saladin,
Mhm.
and they automated the malt production very much.
Mhm.
And I was able to see such Saladin boxes. I think they were the very, very last
Yeah.
production in Scotland, and just a year after they closed it down because it was cheaper than the malting floors, but still more expensive than the malting drums.
Yeah, today they use big drums that rotate really slowly, and yeah,
And
it's
the yield from the peat, they use less and less peat.
Yeah, the yield from peat is very good if you dampen the peat a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So more questions.
no, the Isles belong to the McDonald's. I thought Campbelltown 57 ppm 55. Some talk about other stuff. No, just pour it. If I find one, I'll.
Charles Doig, yes, he was the constructor, the architect of those pagodas, and he constructed so many distilleries. Yeah, the Doig's pagodas. I don't know if the Bowmore pagoda we've seen have been from Charles Stark. I don't think so, because he built not those high chimneys. He built this ones.
Belzebong, less talking, more drinking.
We're here to talk, and you're here or there to drink.
History and info also very important for beginners.
Yes, on the tube it says, or on the bottle it says, the most richly flavored of all Scotch whiskies, and I think there hadn't been any arguments about this sentence.
It's really an intense whiskey,
Yeah.
but I find the smoke, the smell, a bit intriguing. That it hides a bit of its true strength. I think the strength in the taste. I know that one. I know that the strength in the taste is much more stronger than I smell right now.
So first you have all this phenolic, medicinal, this hospital smell, this disinfection from hospital. So it takes quite a time until your nose gets adapted to it, and you find other things below.
Yeah.
There's some seaweed near sea. Yeah.
Yeah, today it's a bit of a stinky for me.
Yeah. So this one is. Give me the camera. Yeah. So this one is very smooth in the taste, because the stills of Laphroaig have very narrow constricting piece over the pot. So the alcohol vapors divide very, very well over the pot. This brings this mellow taste in it, and this is very much in contrast to this extreme smell and the peat, which is now, or the smoke is now covering my mouth from the inside. It's intense. There's some sweetness in it as well, and a little bit of remembrance of saltiness.
When you swallow it, you realize, oh my god, that has really intense peat, seaweed, bit of a bitter tone, it's incredibly strong, it's incredibly powerful. I don't have that much sweetness. I have very, very little sweetness. For me, it's the character of sea, a little bit of iodine, a little bit of remembrance of saltiness. I like it.
in the aftertaste, it's still in my mouth.
It's incredible.
Ah.
Okay, here says someone, Michael Griesler, moist peat, seaweed and iodine, dry peat, ashtray.
Ashtray.
I have to ask the next guy who is doing the peating next time.
As your grandma with the ashtray, just help her.
Definitely seaweed, maybe some citrus as well. Yeah, you have this little bit of a acidic note in here. If it burns, why does it burn like hell? Huh? Okay, bananas. Okay, cherry candy.
Oh, somebody is using tasty cones.
No, that's just banana.
Just banana.
It's like you do have it in the emoticons as well, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a cherry cough drop.
A cough drop, yes. There's this medicinal thing. After burning, not too much. There was some spiciness in it, but it was quite smooth from the alcohol.
I didn't have that much after burning. I had more of a peat.
Probably smoked too much.
Yeah, but I like it. It's an intense whiskey. Very nice.
So there was a question about the comparison of Laphroaig to other highly peated or smoky whiskies, and well, this is very much on the level of the other called Kildalton distilleries, where the Kildalton Cross is on the south coast of Islay, and those distilleries residing there are called the Kildalton distilleries, and this is very much in the same level, giving plus minus 5 ppm with them. But it's a more stinky one, so more medicinal, more phenolic.
I'm not sure if I had the cask strength version of the Laphroaig as a remembrance. That has even bit more kick in it.
Yeah, so this is just 40%. Helps you not to get overwhelmed with everything from this bottle. But if you're moving forward, there are higher percentages, ABVs of these bottles. There is the quarter cask and the triple cask of the Laphroaig. They have no age statement, so they are not that mellow. They are a little bit younger, probably 8-9 years old.
And even a bit more.
And they have more pressure from the wood.
Aggressive.
And they are at 48% ABV. So
and the
those
quarter casks are the small casks that have so you have a lot of wood influence, a lot of
the ratio
additive,
between wood and content.
A lot
is
of
better.
additive maturation.
So and these are the successes of this one, if you like it more intense. The Bowmore, 12 years old, have, there are older brothers, the 15 years old, the 18 years old, which is one of my very, very best. And there are younger ones, which are then more, younger, more intense, but less sherry influence in them. The Connemara is, there is a second one called a Distillers Edition, which shows a lot of sherry influence in maturation. This gives a more round, more complex one. And the Ardmore, there is a portwood finish, I think, on the market, yes. And this is also one of my very, very best. I find it the best in 1 month. So the Ardmore has a very lot of potential. And to all these 4 peated malts of distinction, there are even more advanced ones, not even better, but different ones, more expensive ones. But these 4 are the entry whiskies. And what's your sequence?
Sequence of being the best?
Yeah.
Still the Bowmore. Still the Bowmore. I just like this this comparison of fruitiness, sweetness, and smokiness. I like not comparison, but the not counterculture, like counter tastes. That's really, really nice if you have that smokiness coming in, and then you have the sweetness kicking in with, I don't know, flowers and fruits and grapes and everything. So for me, it's the 12-year. But what I also liked was the Connemara.
This is as well my
Connemara
first.
was also very
and
good.
The Connemara is the second one for me. And then I have to say, I do not like the very stinky ones, as listeners of our channel will know. But then the Laphroaig and the Ardmore is a little bit too weak. So it's
What, the Laphroaig is too weak?
No, the Ardmore is a little bit too weak.
Okay.
So either it needs a few ABV more, or it needs this finishing in port wine cask, and then it really glows up. Then it's really intense and good.
What I also liked about the Connemara was just the roundness. You had a very roundness, mellow, just almost a bit of a, what do you call it, velvet touch in there. It's like a smoky velvet touch in there. Really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming up next, November, we're not going to do a live tasting.
Too much work to do.
Too much work to do, but we're going to do a live tasting in December on the 27th. Or are we going to do it in English as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably. And we're going to do a beginner's live tasting. So if you want to have the start of the whiskey again, to learn everything from the bottom up, then tune in to the 27th of December.
And probably you invite some friends spreading the news about whiskey.
If you want to teach someone or have someone taught the beginnings of whiskey, then please feel free to forward our links to these people.
And it might make sense to buy full bottles then, because you have more audience with you.
So 27th is just, 25th is... Christmas. We already have Christmas Eve at 24th, but Christmas, first day of Christmas, second day of Christmas, and then you kind of know what are you gonna do. And 27th is Whiskey Day. Yeah. so on that day we're gonna hold a whiskey tasting, and on the German channel we're gonna send out the presents for the people, or they can buy the presents for other ones. So we're gonna tell you what whiskeys we're gonna try. So maybe you can find some people and have a gathering, or I don't know what you ever want to do.
Just a good time. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.